Alrighty, time for Here's the Deal. And joining us tonight in studio, Dara Parker and Lee Checkstad. And from our downtown studio, Cheryl Ziola, who is fresh back from a tropical vacation and very tanned. I was joking saying we're going to ban you from the show because you're rested and relaxed and the rest of us are stressed out. But welcome back.
Thanks, Jill.
All right, let's start. Yeah, I bet. Let's start with this gay rental dispute, we're calling it. An older couple rented out a place to a young man, Jonathan Pretty, and I would like to let you all know he is appearing next on the program right after this segment. And 10 hours later, phoned him back and said, yeah, no, you can't have the suite. I don't want to say there's confusion. There's not a lot of confusion, but when we talk to the gentleman again, gosh, he's saying, no, I'm not against gays and homophobic, but no, I don't want men kissing.
But I'm worried it's going to scare away the neighbors.
And I know you want to go wild on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a clear-cut case of discrimination. And yes, he's not homophobic, but he's worried that kissing other men may offend his neighbors or his wife. But more importantly, he's worried he may get infected with HIV through the shared laundry. And I know it's almost ludicrous and how ridiculous that is, but really, I think this is an indication that these kind of deeply held beliefs still exist. And I think often...
Okay, but does that surprise you? I mean, when you'll hear the man, if you haven't heard, Ted Salatellis is his name, if you haven't heard him yet, we are playing clips of him in the next block. He's old country. And I'm not saying that's an excuse and he should be able to get away with it, but it's generational and it's historical, and he comes from an era when people were afraid they would get HIV from the laundry.
We were all alive in the 80s. We were all alive during that era when there was a whole bunch of misinformation floating around, and that's really dangerous, and we need to evolve and change, and people have done that.
But what if he hasn't been exposed to that new information?
Community has a wonderful queer competency training that we offer to people, and I would just love to share that information. It's an ongoing conversation. We need to educate people, and that kind of behavior is not acceptable in 2013. It shouldn't have been acceptable 20 years ago, but in a progressive society like Canada, these things need to be addressed quickly, swiftly.
Cheryl?
Yep. Can I just jump in here, though? I'm a little unclear as to why the gentleman, the renter, even volunteered what his sexual orientation.
I don't think he did.
No. Well, he claimed he did. It wasn't asked by the landlord, and it wasn't on the rental application, obviously. So I found that a little strange. But all that being said, I mean, I live and work in Kitts. It's a fairly progressive community, and I was a little surprised that that incident occurred. I mean, even the Pope, the new Pope Francis, has actually embraced sexuality, which is kind of interesting. That's pretty groundbreaking stuff. And Princess Diana hugged AIDS patients in the late 80s, early 90s, and I thought that went a long way to disputing the belief that you could catch AIDS by casual contact or shared laundry, for goodness sake.
And that's been challenged by what we've seen demonstrated here. And as a queer woman who's looked for apartments in Vancouver, I've been hesitant to reveal my sexual identity because I don't know what kind of attitudes I'm walking into. And other instances, I've offered that information because I want to make sure I'm in a safe environment. So I understand why somebody might want to say, I'm gay and I'm moving in with my partner, because you don't want to walk into an environment where you're going to get kicked out a week later. So I don't know what the situation was here, but I understand why he might have volunteered that information. It's not uncommon in the community.
No. I don't think he did, though, but we're going to, as I said, we're going to talk to Jonathan Pretty shortly, so I'll ask him that because it's interesting. I mean, I think we all get that it's not acceptable in this day and age, and he has a case, and he's launched a dispute.
So what should be done to the guy? I think, as you said, he comes from a day and age where people did believe that. I don't think criminal charges are going to fix this.
No. Education might, though.
Right.
Yes. And required education.
Yeah, and just an openness to having these kinds of conversation. And I think the media needs to shine a spotlight on this, because I think it does come as a shock to progressive, urban-minded folks in Vancouver.
That it's still happening.
That it's still happening. Yeah. And because, of course, I work in the queer sector, I know that this is much more regular than people understand.
Yes.
People still live in fear of being outed at their work, in their house that they're renting. This is a lot more common than people understand. And so
I know, I think most of us have thought, oh, hey, we've covered that hurdle. You know, we're on to the next one.
Not.
Now we're really working sort of more on for transgendered people, you know, and those difficulties.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. We haven't fixed this
There's
yet.
work to be done.
We haven't fixed this. All right. Ruling out today, the Bazyverk legal costs were perfectly legal. They were made by a bureaucrat. There was no political interference. So we, the taxpayers, footed that $6 billion bill. Cheryl, your take on this?
Well, you know, regardless of the fact that there was no political interference, I think there's something rotten in the province of BC where two political staffers can admit to legal wrongdoing and have taxpayers pick up the tab. And I think the festering stink of that payout offends every single taxpayer in BC. I think we need to rewrite the code of conduct so that if this were ever to happen again in the future, if they were convicted, they should have to pay back all of their legal costs.
I agree. The crux of the issue is that they offered guilty pleas and we're still picking up the tab. That's ridiculous. I understand and support that somebody in their employment, if they get taken to court during the course of their employment, I think the costs should be covered by the government, but not if the verdict is that they're guilty, and certainly not if you offer up a guilty plea at a suspicious time in the court trial.
It's interesting because it sort of, I mean, it's not identical, but it kind of makes me think of journalists who might be sued in the course of doing their work.
Well, if the journalist admits guilt, your opinion changes on whether they're responsible for...
Right, but would the company then still cover them? I don't know. Does a company have what's the word?
An obligation?
Thank you. Yes, an obligation.
That might be a good
Let me answer for you. No, they don't. I mean, that's crazy talk. We can't be...
Not if you're guilty.
Yeah, if you're guilty and you're admitting guilt. It wasn't even... They offered up their own guilty pleas, and this is, you know, a trial that's dragged on for 7+ years with a huge price tag attached. No, I'm offended as a BC resident that this is the outcome.
All right. Finally, we're going to head over... Sorry, Cheryl.
Sorry, two different rules, though, for political types. Let's not forget Sven Robinson pocketed a $50,000 diamond ring and never faced any criminal charges. But I bet he paid for his own lawyer.
He might have, yes. But then Mike Duffy also had a whole bunch of stuff paid for, which has now caused a lot of problems. Let's talk about the mayor of Surrey. You know, there was a trip a few months ago. They went to Colombia, and they actually, the trip was $11,000, which is pretty cheap when you consider flying from here to South America. And they secured the 2016 Fast Pitch tournament for women, which is huge because that'll bring in, you know, money to Surrey.
My community will love it.
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
That was a lesbian joke.
That was a lesbian joke. A lot of lesbian fast pitch players apparently coming to town.
Oh no, I've ruined Lee.
No, you haven't. We're good. We're good.
I just like how you slid it in there.
Yeah, you did. You startled me though, which is rare. So now we're in Israel. Diane Watts is in Israel, and they're talking to an organization called the it's Israel Brain Technologies, I believe, which my research showed it to be a non-money-making, sort of a charitable organization trying to better Israel. So how are we going to have scientific technology sort of working in Surrey? I don't know.
I'm not against it in principle. I don't think enough information is out about this trip, but the idea of mayors of major cities in Canada going on trade missions, I support, because I think that local government is a major player in terms of brokering trade relations. I think that there's potential to make our cities capitals of technology and innovation. So the general principle doesn't offend me. One particular quote in this story around not knowing the specific costs of the trip, even though been approved for months through a committee and debated, that was a little suspect to me because I think there should be a cost associated when you're making
certainly by now
decisions.
They would know airfare and hotel and per diems,
and
right?
I think that has to be factored into the decision. How much is this costing in terms of a cost-benefit analysis and determining what are the priorities for the city? So that's just a little suspect to me.
Cheryl?
I just want to jump in. There's a couple of quick things here. First of all, trade missions or junkets, whatever you want to call them, are generally the purview of the federal and provincial governments, not civic governments. And most times trade missions don't result in a lot of new business. You get a memorandum of agreement or understanding. It has no substance behind it. So, you know, perhaps Diane Watts went on this trip because she's rehearsing for a role on the federal or provincial stage, but
She says not.
I'm not clear that it was really an economic home run for Surrey when all she netted out of this was a softball tournament. But on the flip side, she went to Colombia at the end of October. Isn't that right around the time our weather gets cold? So I'll bet the Surrey city merchants had her buy a lot of sunscreen.
Well, it is kind of interesting. So the Columbia thing was the fast pitch tournament.
And really, I think that was good value for money when you think $11,000 for one of the biggest sporting events.
And to just add to the cynicism, I thought, oh, a trip to the Holy Land near Christmas. That's kind of convenient. That's just where my head went. All right, ladies. Cheryl Ziola, Dara Parker, and of course Lee Checkstead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next on Unfiltered, we are talking to Jonathan Pretty, the young man who says he lost out on an apartment because he's gay.